It was the first year of the first international karate championships held in Long Beach, and my job was to make sure that Bruce Lee, at Parker gave me a certain amount of money to make sure he ate properly and make sure he got back to the hotel room, sort of like his host. And I met him then and grew to really like his personality, and we became very close friends. When Bruce arrived in the United States, he had the training in Wu-style Tai Chi, sometimes in Hong Kong they call it Unga, and he had the, of course, training in Western boxing. He had training in fencing from his brother, that's epee, that goes from toe to head. He had training, obviously, in Wing Chun, and the other area was the training he had received in, they call it Buk Pai, or it's Tam Toi. He knew 12 sets in Tam Toi. And then I believe he traded with a Choi Li Fat man. So those were the arts that Bruce brought into the United States. What Bruce did, as it related to me, that he could never learn from the top man, because in those days, Kung Fu practitioners were quite prejudiced, and they didn't usually share the knowledge with other people from other styles. So what Bruce did, he knew that, so what he did would go to the second or the third or fourth man in the system and say, well, look at how would you like to learn Wing Chun? And I'll trade you my Wing Chun knowledge for your praying mantis. Let's say it's Northern praying mantis. And that's what he did, because he knew that the head instructor wouldn't teach him. So he did that in Southern mantis. Southern mantis, I believe he trained straight with the man. But a lot of the styles that he trained in Chinese Kung Fu, the way he picked it up, he would exchange the knowledge in Wing Chun for different Chinese, different styles. And of course it was between him and the person he traded with. So he usually picked the second or third or fourth or fifth man within the hierarchy or of the top five in each Kung Fu system. And then as he approached that, he worked obviously with a lot of Western boxers. A lot of his students were sort of street-type fighters. He worked with various different wrestlers and judo men and jiu-jitsu men, and slowly went away from the traditional or the classical way of training in Kung Fu. And he sort of changed the methods. In other words, he did away with the classical, traditional ways of forms. But I think he still kept the forms, but he separated between what was the forms and what was the way he wanted to train for martial art. He referred to the forms as martial art gymnastics. And that's the first part that you would see, because when I first learned under Bruce, he was teaching me sets. For the first 6 months of my training, I learned sets. And I was learning a set in Northern Mantis, and the first set in Wing Chun, and a little first part of the Wu system, Tai Chi Chuan. And then within about 3 to 6 months, it's hard to go back in my memory right now, but he said that's not where it was at. And he just completely stopped teaching me that, and went into this, what I call his way of thinking, his way of training. Instead of doing, like in other words, the Wing Chun dummy, for an example. And I think Bruce only knew from 1 to 60, I believe. And he wanted to learn the rest of the Wing Chun dummy. And at that time, he did not know. And I think he went back to Hong Kong and tried to learn it, but somehow reason he could not. So he felt that the first 1 to 60 was the very important. Instead of training from 1 to 60, he would take a portion of that 1 to 60 and train that thing over and over and over and over again. That's the way he taught. And then he came to a point where he started to not even follow the prescribed method on the Wing Chun dummy. He just started to freelance it. And that's what he did with the forms. He just took a section of the form and shadow box it, pretty much like a Muay Thai fighter would do. He would shadow box the movements, right? Or like a Western boxer would shadow box. And he would take it out of the form, analyze it, investigate it, and say, no, that's not the way you would actually do it in combat. I'll change it a little bit. And probably, I'm safe to say, he was probably very much criticized during that time period. Absorb what his useful concept is just something that he felt that every individual was different. Therefore, he couldn't really follow his instructor per se. So realizing that you couldn't follow his instructor, he had to find out what worked for him. But of course you have a base system. And so his interpretation is that you could, say, unite Wing Chun and flow right into Jiu-Jitsu, and go from Jiu-Jitsu into Western boxing, and Western boxing out to Savate or out to Muay Thai, and go back and in and out of various disciplines. This was his idea, and he seemed to, as people said at that time, get away with it. But a traditionalist might frown on that, because that's not the accepted way. There are some people that, when you study with them, whatever the style is, they want you to say strictly Chole Fat, or let's say Chole Fat, for instance. Okay, but his concept was that you didn't have to. You could flow from Chole Fat into Wing Chun if you knew how to do it. You can flow from Chole Fat into Western boxing hands. From Western boxing hands, you can flow into Jiu-Jitsu. You can flow into grappling. So absorb what is useful is that, identically what he's trying to say is from a book called The Art of War, Sun Ji. He says, absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, and add specifically what works for you. So that's basically the philosophy behind absorb what is useful. Transcending technique is many ways you could do this, but the techniques really aren't that important. What makes a technique, in my opinion, is the timing, the rhythm. Okay, your personal attributes like your agility, your balance, your coordination, dexterity, stamina, strength for that certain time period. The technique has to fit the individual. Technique has to fit motion, both your motion and the opponent that you're flowing with. That's the important part about technique. So attributes, according to Bruce, were probably more important than technique. Developing speed or stamina or strength, those are attributes that you do use in combat. And that's, I think, what he was trying to say there, that you got to transcend the technique, both physically and mentally. Having no limitation as a limitation, the philosophy behind that is that if you are trained in a particular martial art, which is called a Japanese style, they might see something in another style that they like, let's say another Chinese style. But because of the curriculum, they stay within the boundaries, so therefore it limits what he can use. As having no limitation is your limit, he's using no limit. The boundaries within the Western boxing, let's say that's a boundary because you're boxing, you're strictly using your hands. You're not really using your knee, you're not using your elbow, so it is limited. Wrestling, for the most part, unless it's professional wrestling, you're not allowed to use the elbow or bite and gouge. So you're limited because that gives you a kind of a structure to work with. Judo is very good art. They throw well, they choke well, they strangle well, they arm bar, they leg bar, but there is no punching, so that's limit. So he's trying to say using no limitation as styles do limit to a certain degree. Bruce said that to transcend technique, it has to punch, it has to kick. You don't punch, it punches, it kicks, it elbows, it knees, it head smashes, all right? It does everything. It grapples, it locks, it chokes, it strangles. It was the transcending of self. You don't know how you hit. It hit by itself without even a conscious effort. That's what he's talking about, that the it. So he's transcending the physical. He told me once, well, I don't know if it's true or not, he said that he could see himself, if there was a person he's fighting, that he never fought the battle from here. He fought the battle from here, and he could see himself and the opponent. He says, I says, let me get this straight now. You mean your opponent's here, and you're not here watching this guy? He says, yes, I'm watching from here. So he had that saying, and I think it's in one of his sayings, he says, be like a wooden doll. It has no ego. It just moves like a wooden doll because you move. So he can absorb it, like you said, you can observe things better from a third person. Without clearly, like it's when I train fighters, I couldn't understand why they couldn't see the opening when they were sparring, right? And why they didn't cover this. But when you get in there, you can't see the opening. You could see it from the third person, and that's what Bruce was saying he was seeing it. For a good example, when I played football, if I made a good run, it was so effortless. When you're up there in the stadium, you can see the openings where he should have ran left and right. But when you're running with the ball, you can't see the openings sometimes, right? Your coach from the bench can see it, and your scout up there in the stadium can see where you should have ran left or right, or you should have put on a speed, or should have stopped short and cut to the left or to the right. But when you're in the heat of it, you really can't see it, right? That's what he's saying, that he sees it from a third person. Therefore, he can see the openings. That's why a trainer has to tell his boxer or his fighter when he comes back to the corner, he says, loop with the overhead. He's dropping his hands because sometimes he's so occupied in trying to defeat his opponent, he can't see it because he's not a wooden doll. You have to be formless, as he should tell us. And that's, I think, what he's trying to say. It does it because he's no longer in the body. What Jun Fan was basically, I think its base system was probably Wing Chun, and thrown in with ideas that he picked from Savat, Muay Thai, as he saw it, as he observed, thrown in with various different Kung Fu systems and Western boxing with Jiu-Jitsu and different things he had learned from different grappling arts from China. And that's the basis of Jun Fan. The liberation of Jun Fan, we get into now what we call Jeet Kune Do. For an example, to expand on what Jeet Kune Do is, Jeet Kune Do is a very personal thing. Therefore, it is not really a product. Rather, it's a process. It's a process of becoming, and you're constantly changing. The only thing you can be sure about time is it's constantly changing, even the ideas. Okay? So Jeet Kune Do, for an example, if I had one student, he might incorporate only 20%, let's say, Western boxing, as another student might really like it, so he'll use 80% Western boxing. Another person might incorporate 100% Muay Thai. Another person might not like the training, so he might incorporate 10. That's strictly up to him. A person might incorporate grappling. Let's say there's three persons. One person might not incorporate any of it. Another person would incorporate maybe 10%, another person 50%, another person maybe 80% of it. But what is important, that he is exposed to that particular discipline. The way I'm moving now, I use the discipline to develop attributes. That's the key thing, because I believe, like Tai Chi Chuan, for an example, it has a lot of good characteristics that I like. You know, it sort of calms the system down, and it has balance. It promotes balance, and it has good body control when you do it. Muay Thai, the advantage I think there is that they are really, as far as conditioning in the martial art, I consider them to be the most highly conditioned martial artists out there. So I like to incorporate that aspect of it. I leave my students to say, well, do they like the training in Muay Thai better than they like the training in Bando or so on. I allow my students to choose what they like, what they want to do, and what art that they want to gravitate to. And I think this is important. Just as when people go through public school, you should give them a base study course, but you allow them after they come out to pick what they want, whether they want to concentrate on music more, or art, or on math, or on science. So Jeet Kune Do is just the same thing. You concentrate on your effort. A Jeet Kune Do technique can be a boxer's left jab, it could be a boxer's left hook, it could be a boxer's uppercut, and it could be a cross. It could be a Muay Thai kick on the thigh. It could be an elbow from Muay Thai. It could be a knee from Muay Thai. It could be a wrist lock from Jiu-Jitsu or Aikido. It's whatever works. So a Jeet Kune Do technique, you can't really classify a Jeet Kune Do technique. In the way of in the realm that Bruce had it, it's absorbing what is useful for you. Since it is not a style, we use maybe certain disciplines to get certain attributes, to develop certain things. So there is no Jeet Kune Do technique as per se, as the way he founded the idea. Okay? Many people refer to it as a style, but it's not a style, because it's not a style as a product. And as he used to tell me, it is a process. It's a process of constant growth. And what is Jeet Kune Do for you now might not be Jeet Kune Do for you 6 years down the line because of age, because of time, a factor of training and things of that nature. Jeet Kune Do now, since there's a lot of disciples that came from Bruce, and I have a lot of students, each is developing it in the way that they think it should be developed. Some people don't want to come out, they want to stay in the garage and teach 1 or 2 or 3 students, that's fine too. Others want to promote it more, get it into the limelight a little bit more, and that's fine too. Like, for an example, Daniel Lee, he teaches Jeet Kune Do, but his main thrust is Tai Chi Chuan. He promotes it through Tai Chi Chuan. As Richard Bustillo is more into Western boxing, he's more into kickboxing. He takes that aspect of Jeet Kune Do and tries to push that aspect. Larry Harsel is more into what we call Filipino Dumog, which is grappling, or Layog, which is another form of Filipino grappling, and mixing in with a little Chinese Chin-Au here and there, and Western wrestling, and some things from Jiu-Jitsu and some things from Aikido that he's integrated for himself. So Jeet Kune Do, the only worry that I have is that some of these people might lead their disciples down one particular path and say, this is Jeet Kune Do, and my Jeet Kune Do is the way Bruce would have had it. Then my person might say, no, it's in the kickboxing, and it's in the Thai boxing, and it's in the wrestling. This is the way Bruce would have had it, okay? That's the only danger that I see. Bruce did hand out certain techniques, but they were used to illustrate a certain point when you might use this at a particular range. And the thing that he used to tell me, there are certain weapons that are good for certain ranges. Like a grenade, you wouldn't use it 5 feet away from you. You might use a dagger. A staff, you might use it for a little bit shorter distance. A grenade would be good maybe if there's a machine gun nest out there 50 yards, and that would be the time to use it. There are certain techniques that are good for certain circumstances. Once a man crashes in and he's in grappling range, you should use it. So there are some people who don't believe in the grappling range, but if you look at any professional boxing match or kickboxing match, they within 2 to 3 kicks or 3 or 5 punches, they're already in clinching range. So you should have a grappling art. You can't afford not to learn it. Okay? Some people say, well, I'll finish it all in kicking range. I'll finish it all. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that every system or discipline has its time and place. For an example, Bruce used to ask me, he said, Dan, what's the best way of travel? I says, 747, jet, United Airlines. Possibly. He says, well, if you're going across the street, the jet wouldn't be very much of use, would it? If you wanted to go 2 or 3 blocks, maybe a bicycle might be better than the car. And if you're in the jungles of the Amazon, he says, the Porsche that McQueen drives isn't any good because they can't use it under that environment.